All right, welcome back. For this week's lesson, we are going to be looking at the discussion opinion between if you should drop the barbell at the top of a deadlift or if you should lower the barbell from the top of a deadlift. Now, the short answer is this all depends on your goals, but I'm going to look at a little bit of the things as to like why one might do one or the other. So, I think that the idea of dropping the barbell, in the first place, it's probably just fun. I think it's probably fun. It's fun because it's loud, whatever, you picked it up, you drop it. I think that I can see how that's kind of, I understand some of the reasons why I think that starting people do it. But if we're looking at Olympic lifting, and obviously Olympic lifters drop the bar from, over their head or from their shoulders, depending on what they're trying to improve, there's some things we need to kind of look at and think about. So, in Olympic lifting, traditionally, there is very little eccentric work. Eccentric means lowering, and we need to understand what that does and what it doesn't do. So, one thing that it allows, if you drop the bar, is it allows you to train with more volume, because that eccentric component has much more of a neural impact than leaving it out. So, if an Olympic lifter, puts the bar over their head and they drop it from the top, it allows them to train with more volume, so they can train with more frequency. And traditionally, Olympic lifters, when I went to the Olympic Training Center back in 2007, I think they were working out, they were working out twice a day, 6 days a week. And I think they were doing like a recovery day on Wednesday, so they might have been working out, I think they took Sundays off. I don't remember the exact schedule, but they were training with a kind of a high amount of volume. Not as much as the Bulgarians were known to have done back during their peak, but they were training quite a bit. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, are you an Olympic lifter? Or are you a competitive Olympic lifter? And then you want to maybe look at to what degree are you competitive. If you're an amateur, you might not need to worry about it, because if you're working a 9-to-5 job or something similar, and you're not training twice, 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, then you don't need to worry so much about like how the volume is going to affect your performance. The other thing you have to understand is, and this is where I think we have a disconnect with the general public and the idea of dropping the bar, is Olympic lifters most of the time they're trying to compete in a weight class, so they don't want to build muscle, so they're not looking for a metabolic response. They don't care about their body fat percentage. They're trying to improve their lifts, right? So they're just trying to get stronger. So some of it's technique work, and some of it's just trying to improve their PRs, and then depending on how good of a program they're enrolled in, they may or may not do some assistance work to help bump those numbers up. That just depends on how much their coach really understands about what they're doing, which is not today's subject. So what you need to understand is, are your goals going to be better met by dropping the bar or by doing that eccentric component? So one thing you need to understand at the top is most people are stronger eccentrically than they are concentrically. That means you can lower more weight than you can pick up. So for most people right there, it just kind of doesn't make sense to me that people want to drop the bar. One of the arguments that I hear for dropping the bar is if you do that eccentric component, it's going to make you sore. Without being really insulting, is that the pansy argument? I'm not sure what's going on there, but it will make you really sore when it's a new exposure, but as you adapt to it, it's not going to make you as sore. So that I see that particular argument having very limited use, especially for the general public. So, and if you're concerned about that, you can modulate that by just manage your volume. So if for some reason you really need to not be sore, just let's say you're doing sets of 5 reps, just do 2 sets or maybe 3 sets. Don't do very many sets, and you won't induce as much trauma to the muscle, and you're not as likely to get sore. If you're doing 10 to 12 reps, then maybe just do a couple sets. But again, it all goes back to your goals. So now, my argument for doing the eccentric component and lowering the barbell under control is, actually it's kind of complex, but in the first place, if you're trying to create a metabolic response, you need that eccentric component. So metabolic response, meaning if you're either trying to build muscle or if you're trying to burn fat, you want more time under tension. So if you're trying to build muscle, unless you're gifted or on steroids, most people, that takes between 40 and 60 seconds of time under tension to give your body the correct hormonal response to build muscle. So what that means is that set that you're performing needs to take 40 to 60 seconds. So if you pick the bar up and you drop it, that's obviously not a 40 or 60 second thing. Now, if somebody's gifted, the old joke is somebody who's got like really good genetics, they'll bend over to pick up a penny and their bicep will grow half an inch. That is not most of it. It's most of us. It's certainly not me. So most of us, if we want to build muscle effectively or burn fat effectively, we need to line everything up in our favor that we can. So lowering that barbell under control is going to do a lot more to create a metabolic response from a hormonal standpoint than just picking it up and dropping it. So now we could go a lot of different directions with that, but that's kind of the main thing. I might have a different argument if you're setting up some kind of a circuit where somebody's doing a deadlift combined with something else. But most of the time I don't. I've done a lot of things where I'll have a client do maybe like a deadlift paired with kettlebell swings or snatches and or a sled work. So, and a lot of other things. So there's a lot of things you can do, or even combining that with like upper body work, but if we're looking at fat loss. The other thing is most people have soft tissue injuries because they can't decelerate limbs efficiently. So if I look at a sprinter as an example, if a sprinter blows out their hamstring or he pulls it, that's typically during the deceleration phase of the sprint where the hamstring is decelerating their leg as it comes up so it can change directions. So another example would be like a baseball player that if their rotator cuff is weak, if their trap 3 is weak, if the rhomboid's weak, if their little stabilizer muscles are weak and it can't effectively decelerate that limb after they throw that ball, they're more likely to injure their shoulder. So that eccentric strength can be very important for sporting movements. You have to understand how to work with it, and you want to be careful about how you apply that, depending on if you're like in season or off season. But for the most part, most athletes, if they will put in some focused eccentric work, especially like early in an off season, they will be less injury prone. So, and just for the people that are in the general public, you're actually making yourself less injury prone if you perform a good quality eccentric. So regardless of all that, again, it's just going to come back to your goals. If for some reason you're like competing in some kind of a weight class thing and you absolutely positively don't want to gain an ounce, then dropping the bar at the top might make sense. But if you're not real concerned about that, for most people, I think lowering that bar under control is way more, not just more practical, but it's conducive to most people's goals. So that's it for today's lesson. Have a good week.